This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Well, welcome on Palm Sunday, by the way, to the altar of Bard for our Sunday morning. And I'm sitting in New York, and I'm going to escape before tomorrow's festivities or solemn occasion, which is the arrival of the former president to Manhattan to be arraigned on Tuesday. Although I still, as I've speculated elsewhere, not on Bard, I think recently, there is part of me that wonders why he's going to just surrender on Tuesday, given the fact that this is a state court case, given the fact that DeSantis has already indicated that he wouldn't honor nor look at an extradition request. Both, ironically, most people are talking about the extradition request as being a ministerial act, but that's never stopped him before. I mean, that was the same thing that Pence had invoked for the election on January 6th, that the vice presidential counting of the ballots is a ministerial act. Here in this case, I think he's got a little bit more gravitas on it, that he can make I think, a compelling argument, or at least an argument that would probably tie this thing up for a while, that this is a political prosecution, which has already been embraced both by him and by those around him and the party, and that a state-to-state extradition request has to go from governor to governor. And if that's the case, and DeSantis has already said he's not going to honor it, it's an interesting legal issue.
Well, I mean, is there anything that, aside from what's being reported in the press, is there anything to stop him from changing his mind on that? I mean, there's been indication, obviously, that he's going to surrender, and he's got, Tacopina out there saying that he hopes that it's a classy affair and that they can do it quickly and, with all due tact. But, who knows? He could just change his mind, right?
I suppose he could. I mean, he said that he's going to have a press conference, at least what's being reported today, Tuesday, at Mar-a-Lago. And it's interesting, I suppose, that what he plans on doing is flying up. By the way, if he does surrender, one of the things that I think you will find, I've had a similar situation where there was a U.S. Marshal versus Secret Service in a, not totally like this, but with a former Speaker of the House. And in that case, Secret Service ended up bigfooting the other law enforcement agency. And so I can't imagine that normally what would happen, which is normally when you surrender somebody, you would get fingerprinted, booked, mugshot, blah, 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 go held in a holding cell until you go out and the judge orders you release. I don't think that's going to happen if he does, in fact, come up and surrender.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine that the Secret Service would allow any of that to happen. I mean, I saw a question this morning on one of the talk shows about whether or not there was going to be a perp walk, and no, the Secret Service is not going to allow a fully publicized, in advance. That's their whole thing, is not letting people, when they can avoid it, not letting people know exactly where the president's going to be, or former president in this case.
Yeah, another irony is the prosecutor who pioneered the perp walk when he was head of the Southern District of New York and used to pull people off of the floor of the exchange or out of a large investment bank was.
Who is Rudy Giuliani?
Correct. There you go. So our own version of Jeopardy this morning. And I cannot imagine, and by the way, one of the, I often talk or invoke Susan McDougal. One of those pictures that you will see, kind of iconic pictures of Susan, is in a very short skirt getting marched out of the grand jury in Little Rock, Arkansas for her perp walk. That actually galvanized the left in support of her and her refusal to testify for Ken Starr and the independent counsel. So I can't imagine that they would want to do that with Trump. By the way, I have taken the position Yeah, there it is. That's kind of an iconic picture of Susan coming out of that Little Rock courthouse after having been refusing to testify. The If you notice already, since the talk of that the grand jury was heating up, and now the indictment, Trump's numbers have skyrocketed. His poll numbers.
Yeah.
He is not only vanquishing the Republican field, he is also it has not eroded his neck and neck status with the current president, Joe Biden. And be careful what you wish for, because there's already calls. This just reminds me of exactly what we were saying back in the 90s, that, when the right was going after Bill Clinton, just wait until it gets reversed. And I think you're going to see, I'll make a bold prediction, you're going to see some red state prosecutor indict or convene a grand jury for somebody, a state court grand jury for somebody else. And it's a really, really troubling precedent for the democracy.
So if you had to predict, come Tuesday, what do we get as far as the media? Are we going to get, just shots of him going in and out of a building from a helicopter while they try to shield the path? Or, are we going to get courtroom, videos or photos as he is arraigned? What is there going to be anything here, or besides just wall to wall talking?
I cannot imagine that they're going to walk him through a phalanx. I would imagine that he will be escorted in, that you will see. You might remember you used to be able to see pictures of Manafort, pictures of Harvey Weinstein. Those were pictures that were done in the Manhattan Supreme Court, which is their trial court. I imagine that would be my best guess as to how that'll play out.
Well, you're not going to have any shortage of talking heads giving their opinions all day, starting, 4 or 5 days ago and going until the end of time. So that should be interesting, if nothing else.
It really is. I'm most interested, frankly, in what we were talking about with Karen on Friday. I'm most interested to see the indictment itself and see if these 30 counts, Karen had speculated that the 30 counts was going to be for the expense reports that were filed and that they could do, and whether there's a conspiracy. I'm interested to see that. I just keep thinking, and we'll know on Tuesday, and we'll talk about it on Tuesday on Reasonable Doubt, but I'm most interested to see if whether or not the reason that they have Susan Nicholas in as part of the team is because she's coming off of the Trump Organization trial, and that some of these 30 some odd counts, as been reported, actually are non-Stormy related counts having to do with the Trump Organization and things that were testified to, and also in the Weisselberg prosecution. So it'll be interesting to see just what the breadth and depth is, because it sure seems like it's an awfully heavy lift for the prosecution. If it was not in Manhattan, by the way, was just doing another hit with somebody who was taking the position, a commentator who was taking the position that he should just go to trial, he can win it, blah, blah, blah. That is a great analysis if you ignore who your jury veneer is, and you ignore where the venue is, because the idea of this being tried in Manhattan is, other than Washington, D.C., I can't think of a worse venue for him to be tried in for a case like this in the supercharged atmosphere.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see exactly how those counts break down. Karen said she thought it might be 34, but everyone seems to be reporting that it's in the 30s. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting, because Karen did not seem uncertain that a lot of the same people were going to be involved, and Karen's never steered us wrong before. So,
yeah, and remember, I don't know that she would embraced me saying it, but she was there. She was the chief assistant for a long portion of when a lot of this was going on. I wonder also whether or not, there's two schools of thought. Do you, at the arraignment, you have a speedy trial right? Do you waive that because you want to do motion work? And that's the other kind of coming attraction and discussion, or when I say discussion, what you're going to spitball before, but the discussion you'll have with the client. Look, do we want to rush this to trial? Rush meaning stand on our speedy trial rights, or do we want to litigate this and try and get this closer to the election so that it gets stayed? I can see arguments on both sides of that. One of the things you might want to do is push ahead with this so that you can kind of press the prosecution. I'm not sure, however, in this case that I would recommend that, because I think they've had, an inordinate amount of time, they being the prosecution, to get their ducks in order, so to speak, to get this thing and to know how this case looks. It's not a case that just got dropped in the prosecutors by the investigators and they're still putting it together. And so you want to rush it before they can have time to adequately put it together. They have a pretty robust and I guess a deep knowledge of what it is and what their witnesses are going to say, because they've interviewed people repeatedly about this. So I'm not so sure that rushing this makes any sense whatsoever, especially given so many of the legal issues that are there. I mean, the statute of limitations is going to be a front and center. You're also going to have this idea of elevating, if it's true that the misdemeanors to felonies. You're going to have all kinds of issues about the melding of the two theories together. And when I say two theories, the state court theory, and then the elevation of, if in fact this is what they've done or what's being reported, that they're going to elevate the misdemeanor to a felony based on a federal offense that was presumably already passed on by the Federal Election Commission, passed on in the sense that they did not bring that act, and that was also passed on by the Southern District. So there are so many issues here, and there's so much discovery work that has to be done. And I don't think also, given the fact that, as you might remember, Gary, right up until the very end, many people thought that they were in trouble, they were going to abandon it, and he was not going to get indicted. Oh, yeah. So I don't know that the legal team has got as much time invested in this as they need. Although, like I said, Susan Nicholas on there, if it turns out that it's non-Stormy related counts, nobody knows that better than she does.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, because thinking about his campaigning style, back in 2016 and sort of through his presidency, if he believes that there's going to be a lot of different road, speed bumps along the way where he's going to have little victories, I think that he's going to defer to that, because he's going to want to go to those rallies and talk about his big wins and, all these, which, whether they're big or not, he can make anything into whatever he wants to, seemingly.
Yeah, seemingly. And it's just setting aside whether or not it's good form to indict the first president in the history of the republic. There are fascinating legal issues, and we'll be talking about them.
Absolutely. Mark, thank you so much for your time on a Sunday morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. Good to see you. See you on Tuesday.
See you then. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.